So this is guide number 5, and this one is about footwear. So what type of footwear, things to look for, considerations. I've also going to include a little bit about footbeds and socks as well, because it's all part of the same package, and it's not just about choosing the boot. There's a lot of value in choosing the right sock and the right footbed or insole, whatever you want to call it, for the boot or shoe you're using, because the one that comes with the footwear is not necessarily the right one for you. A boot can be good, but then with the right footbed, it could be even better. Um, so there's a bunch of things to sort of figure out when it comes to what footwear you're going to use. Um, over the years, I've tried all kinds of stuff. For the longest time, I used to wear size 12. Always wore size 12. That's European 47, I think, 13 in the States. And then I got my feet professionally measured at Altberg, which is a boot maker in Richmond, North Yorkshire in England. They make boots for the military and things like that, and they do a lot of hiking boots as well. And they're handmade. And so I did invest in a pair of Altbergs. And when I went there, I explained how I tried Salomons, Mammoths, Scarpas, all kinds. And I could never find a boot that worked properly for me. And the guy said, right, well, jump on the machine there, we'll get you measured. And it's all like laser measured. And he came back, he said, well, the problem you've got is, whilst your feet on their own are a size 12, you really need a size 13. That's where you've been going wrong. Now, 13 is like a 48, or I think it's a 14 in Star Spangled units. And the problem with a 13 or that size boot is not a lot of manufacturers actually make them. Not in the styles that I want. I mean, they do, but you can be quite limited. Now, for any of the ladies out there who have larger feet, you may need to have a look at men's boots rather than women's boots, because again, a lot of manufacturers will only go up to, like, I don't know, maybe a size 7 or a size 8. You know, my daughter is like, I think, a 9.5 or something, so she tends to have to buy men's boots because women's boots just don't go big enough for her. The one thing to consider with that, though, is men's boots generally are a wider last. So if you've got very narrow feet but long feet, then you might struggle. Footwear manufacturers are getting a lot better in recent years in the sense that they make various widths of the same style of footwear to accommodate that. For example, Handwag, they have the standard fit, they have the wide fit, and they also do one called a bunion fit, which has more room on like the toe, the big toe side. There's more room there, essentially for people who have bunions. But it can also benefit people who need a wider toe box. Now, the Handwag wide are right on the borderline of what is wide enough for me. I have a pair of Tatras, the wide version, and they're a great boot, very comfortable, very durable, cracking boot, to be fair. But for me, the problem is, once I get to about the 8 or 9 mile mark on a hike, my feet start to swell. Not massively, but enough. And so what starts off as a very comfortable boot, at about the 10 mile mark, it starts to feel a little bit restrictive, a little bit tight. So consequently, I spent more time looking for an even wider boot and something that worked well for us. Now, the ones I have found work best for me, and again, it's a very personal thing, is the Mindel Comfort Fit boots. Now, they do the Comfort Fit in a bunch of their different styles. And I've found that with the Comfort Fit, a 12 actually works for me. I don't need to go 13, which means, thankfully, there's a lot more of their boots that I can actually access, because they do a lot more up to a 12 than they do to 13. Now, at Altberg, I got these Altberg Tetherers, and these are the 13 extra wide, and they are really wide in the front here. I call these me apocalypse boots because, to be honest with you, you could walk through the fires of Mordor with these things and you're not even scratch them. They're unbelievable. Very rigid in the sole, you know, and surprisingly comfortable, to be honest with you. They don't, when you look at them and you get them in your hand, you don't think there would be much give in there for when you're hiking, but actually there is. They move really well. I wouldn't use these in Sweden because these are really overkill. They are too rigid, and because of the liner they use, they don't use Gore-Tex in these. They use their own proprietary waterproof liner. These are exceptionally warm boots, like they're really good winter boot, and that's predominantly when I wear them. They keep your feet toasty. Now, I am a fan of the leather type of boot, the traditional sort of hiking boot. But again, like everything else, that's not for everybody. A lot of people, or there seems to be a lot of people moving towards trail runners or trainer type boots. An example of that could be these Adidas Turek Sky Chasers. They are very much like a trainer, very soft, very flexible, very light, and they are extremely comfortable. The grip on them is really good. The sole is Continental, the rubber that they make the tyres out of. I used these to climb Ben Nevis maybe 3 years ago, and they did a cracking job of that, to be honest with you. But then from bottom to top and back down to Ben Nevis is less than 10 miles. I think it's less than 10 kilometres, so it's not a long hike. Would I wear these on a long multi-day? Never, because it's just too soft in the middle. Over the course of, plodding on miles and miles, especially when it's rocky terrain, which sections of the Classic in Sweden are rocky and uneven, you'll feel for me anyway, you feel too much through the sole. So some people like that kind of thing. For me, they have a very specific purpose, and Sweden's not one of them. So we'll put them there. Other trainer type ones, you've got the very sort of like light and minimalist construction sort of trail runners. Some of them have the very sort of solid welt soles and things like that. But you've got things like this as well, Hawkers. These are Hawker Tall Low, I think. These are more of a hiking shoe, I would say, rather than a trail runner, to be honest with you. They're quite heavy. But you'll notice with these, the sole is very thick. It's like walking on a marshmallow. It's very comfortable, don't get me wrong. But the sole is like quite a soft foam here, and then hard rubber on these darkened strips. And what you'll find is, I've had other Hawkers in the past, these sections here, especially around here and up here, they wear away very quickly, compared to the solid rubber soles. So while it's very comfortable and very light, they're not very durable, and these ones are not the best in the sense, I mean, the Gore-Tex line, so they should be waterproof, but the new book and the material, that'll hold a lot of water, so they'll gain a lot of weight while you're hiking them, and these are not the fastest drying things. So for me, no. You'll get ones that are more like this, like a trail runner, but these are like camp shoes for me, because again, it's suede materials. These aren't Gore-Tex lined, so they're not waterproof or anything like that. So for me, these are not really any use on the trail unless you're in a very dry climate and a very warm climate. But I'm just showing these to show the type of thing I'm talking about when I say about sort of like trail runner type trainers. Okay. The ones I used in Sweden last year were these Mindel Turlands GTX. So they are Gore-Tex lined, waterproof. I also treat the new book with Granger's water repellent. And to be honest with you, the first 3 days in Sweden last year were very wet and very windy and miserable and stuff. And these stayed bone dry. They did an absolutely cracking job. I also wore these the year before in the October to do the West Highland Way, and that was just torrential rain for the entire 7 days. And again, stayed dry. So I see a lot of comments when people say, what's the best footwear to use? You see like the ultralight guys, especially like trail runners, because if they get wet, they dry really quickly. Well, for me personally, I'd rather just didn't get wet. I'd rather my feet just didn't get wet than have to wet them and then try and get them dry. And I never had a problem with these. They stayed dry. But these are like quite a supportive boot, but at the same time, they're pretty light. I mean, I think these are something like 650 grams per shoe. Now, for me, mine are all a ton weight because of the size of my feet, you know what I mean? But about 650, 660 grams per boot, I think they are, which is not too bad. And they are a comfortable boot. Now, last year when I did the classic, after day 2, I wished I'd had something more like that for one reason. Anyone who knows the story knows that I did something pretty stupid during the night on day 2 and injured one of my feet, and consequently these didn't really give us the level of protection in the sole area where I had the problem, on the particularly rocky parts of the course. Had I not had the foot injury, they would have probably been bang on, but I did, so they weren't. This year I'll be wearing this. That's not the same boot as that, by the way. This is a Mindel Guffet GTX. It's like super waterproof, full leather boot, pretty rigid, solid sole. Not quite as much as the Altberg, but these are like so comfortable straight out of the box. The Altberg took a lot of breaking in. These were like comfy straight out of the box. Now that's an important thing to think about, is we're only 10 weeks away now from Sweden. Well, 10 weeks tomorrow till we start walking. Certain boots you'll get will take a little bit of breaking in. You're going to have to wear them, walk in them, to get them to the shape of your foot, to soften the leather up, things like that. Now you can use waxes like the Handwag wax or the Mindel Sports Wax, I think it's called. There's a bunch of different ones on the market, and they all pretty much do a similar job. My personal preference is the Handwag wax. I prefer that on my Mindel boots than the Mindel wax. But again, it's a personal preference thing. And by waxing them, you soften the grain of the leather. It waterproofs them more. You know, it cares for the leather so that you're going to get more durability and more life out of the boots, if you like. And one of the benefits of this type of boot is that you can generally get them resoled, whereas something like that one, you're not getting that resoled. You're going to struggle with that. So there's benefits, there's pros and cons. Now, like I say, the ultralight guys, they'll tell you, trail runners, because of what I've mentioned about getting wet and drying quickly. The other benefits of trail runner type shoes or boots is the fact that they're very light for what they are. So if you've not done a lot of hiking and you're used to wearing fairly light footwear, or if you've done some and you've mostly worn light stuff and you've decided I'm going to get something a bit more robust for this hike, you need to consider the fact that you've got more weight on your feet. That's going to actually have an impact on how much energy you use while you're walking. You know, it can tire you out faster by carrying that weight. I mean, there's a reason why you can get ankle weights and wrist weights to train with, to walk with. And that's because that extra weight impacts on things like your hip flexor muscles, your calf muscles, things like that. They can all be impacted by having heavier boots on. Now, as a comparison, you know, I said they're about 650, 660 grams. These are about 1 kilogram per boot. Now, don't get us wrong, for me, they're all heavier because of the size of the bloody things. These are about 1.1 kilogram per boot, you know, so 2 of them is almost 1 of them. It's a quite a significant difference, especially over a long distance, over multiple days. So that's something to consider as well. Now, other options, if you wanted somewhere in between a full-on boot or like a trail runner or something like that, you've got things like this, which is a walking shoe, another Mindel one. And I mean, I found Mindel are the best boots for me by a mile, because they do the comfort fit, and the comfort fit is so much wider across this section, and that's what I need. I need to be able to spread me feet out, and there's no other boot apart from the Altbergs, which are handmade anyway. there's no other boot I've found that is as wide here in a boot as the Mindle Comfort Fit are. A lot of your trail runners and your Hawkers and Ultras and Innovates, things like that, they tend to be quite wide. Now, another one to consider that I haven't mentioned yet, and I don't have a pair simply because I have tried them, but they just are personally. There's a few reasons why I'm not a fan. Well, that's not strictly true. It's not. I'm not a fan. It's just that they're not for me. Is your barefoot boots now? Something like Vivo Barefoot Tracker boots. They're a leather boot in the top section, but they've got a barefoot sole. So what that is, it's a much thinner sole, still protective, but a much thinner sole, very flexible, very light. And what it does is that if you've no experience of barefoot footwear, what it does is they're wider in the toe box, so it allows your foot to spread. And you'll find over a course of a given period of time, the shape of your feet will change back to what your feet really should be, because your feet shouldn't be sort of narrow at the end. They should be, your toes should be splayed, it should be wide, and that's when your foot's at its strongest. Barefoot boots allow your feet to get back to the shape they should be. Now, Jerome, who is one of the admins over on the Fjällräven Classic official page, he, as far as I'm aware, he wears your barefoot boots. There's a Welsh girl, Fit for Adventure is her name on YouTube. She wears them. She speaks very highly of them, and she's got some cracking videos, to be fair. She's done like the Cape Wrath Trail, she's done the Snowdon Way, she's done some pretty big trails, and she wears the barefoots. And she's even got videos explaining how to better get used to wearing them, because that's another thing. If you go barefoot boots, you've got to adapt to them, and that might be quite quick for you personally, but I know for some people it's taken months, and we ain't got months, so that might not be something to consider at this short notice. But maybe for next year's walking season, it could be for you. Now, for me, apart from everything else, I'm type 2 diabetic, and one of the things as a diabetic is I need to protect my feet. I need to look after my feet, because you get an injury to your feet, it can result in, worst case scenario, you lose part of your feet and things like that. So I have to be extra careful with my feet. You wouldn't think it with what I did last year, but that's another story for the coffee social. So that's why I favour the full-on boots, and the barefoot shoes, whilst they weren't uncomfortable, I was just, it may be just a mental thing, but I was constantly concerned of how exposed my feet felt. So I just, wasn't particularly comfortable with them. So I'm happy with my boots. It's taken us, like, as I've said, a few years to find what works for me. Now I've found it, I'm sticking with that. So that's your boots. Now, another thing to consider is the drop. So the drop is how high is the heel compared to the front. Now if you look at these, it's not that much different. It's a few mil. But actually, something like that has got pretty much a zero drop. Your heel is at the same height as your toes, and there's a lot of footwear is zero drop. I personally prefer ones that have a bit of a drop from heel to toe, like these. It doesn't look much, but there's actually a bit more in there than you think. I prefer that. I'm more comfortable with that. And something you'll find if you switch from an elevated heel to a zero drop shoe is that you'll feel it in your calf muscles a lot more, a hell of a lot more. And sometimes you can actually feel it in your knees as well until you adapt to them. Your body will adapt eventually. It adapts to everything, and your body's pretty efficient at doing that kind of adaptation. But initially, you're going to feel it in your calves. I know I did when I've tried zero drop. I go out walking, and within the space of a couple of kilometres, my calves are on fire. And that's because you're stretching the calf more in the Achilles, because the foot is not slightly leaned, it's flat. So it's pulling everything here tighter. As I say, you would adapt to it. But again, this close to the trek, are you wanting to take that risk? And I mean, for me, we've reached the point now, I would say, where I would never recommend changing anything at this late point, because it is only 10 weeks. That's just over 2 months, not long at all. I mean, I remember booking the accommodation for this year in November last year, and that felt like, well, was it November? November. So that was like 9 months before the event, and here we are 7 months further on. It feels like I booked that accommodation like 2 weeks ago. So time is flying by. Now, in terms of what size boots to get, now, I would always tell people to go and get your feet professionally measured. A lot of your good outdoor stores can do that now, and whatever size your feet are, go up a half size or a full size, genuinely, because it'll give you more room across the bridge and it'll give you more room at the end. Now, I've seen a lot of people hiking and trekking over the years losing toenails, getting bruised toes, blisters on their toes, because they haven't had enough space in the front here. And like I say, your feet will swell. Like, most people's feet swell a bit when they're hiking over long distances. And when that happens, it gets tighter across here. If it swells in the heel, it can push your foot forward in the shoe, and then you start hitting your toe on here. And honestly, if that happens at, say, 5 mile mark and you've got another 5 miles to go, it's going to be agony by the time you get to the end. Guaranteed. Now, the other thing is, when you're doing a descent and you're coming down a hill, like say from Chatka Pass down, every time your foot strikes going downhill, your foot wants to move forward, it wants to shoot forward. And if this is very close to your toes to begin with, there's every chance you're going to strike your toes at the front of the boot. And if you've got a long descent like that one is, that constant battering of your toes is, you don't want it. You really don't. So it's better to get a half size or a full size, even bigger, and then you get less likely to have that problem. Now, if you got, say, a full size bigger and you found that it was too big across here, then you can get what they call volume fillers. It's essentially a thin insole that goes in as well as your other insole to just take a bit of space out in that direction. It doesn't take any length out, but it basically makes your foot fill the boot. Or you can wear thicker socks, or wear socks with a liner sock or something like that. But there's ways to compensate for that. But I would always say better to have that bit more room at the front, so then if if your feet do swell, or for long downward sections, you're not going to have that problem with the pain, because it can be really bad. So in terms of that's kind of your boots and your shoes, and there's a million variations in between. Like, there's so many different brands now, so many different models, and it can be a bit of a minefield to try and figure out what works for you. But broadly speaking, that's your boots. Your heavy duty ones, your lighter ones, your trail runner type, your barefoots, and so on. Now, the other thing to consider is the footbed that goes in your boot. Now, with the Altbergs, the original footbed was this one, and it's very thin. It's some sort of man-made plastic foam on the back, like close-cell foam type stuff, but it's quite a firm foam. Now, I didn't like these because this part of the footbed is quite rough. I mean, you can hear it there. It's quite coarse, and I found that created more friction, and therefore you've got more chance of a hot spot and ultimately a blister. So I wasn't a fan of them. I bought these ones to try instead, which are also Svart is the brand, but that's Altberg as well. I got them from the Altberg shop, and they are better in terms of they're a lot smoother and softer, but it's kind of like a gel, and what I find is that makes my feet sweat like mad. So they were a no. In the handwag boots I got, you've got these ones. They are a lot smoother on this side, and this is kind of a felt, so you breathe a bit more. Now they're a really nice insole. If they fit into the Mindel extra wides, I'd have them all day, because they're very nice, but they're too narrow here. In the Mindel extra wides, you get these, and you can see that they're significantly wider. If I put that up against that one, You see, it's level there. That might not look like a lot, but it's actually a substantial difference, through the shoe. So if you had a gap that size on one side of the insole, your feet are going to find that gap, and it's not going to be pleasant. So in the Mindel Comfort Fit, in the Guffets, which is the leather boot, you get these, which are a cork footbed with a gel pad and quite a nice soft material on the top. So they breathe really quite nicely. The problem I have with these, you might think I'm just being picky, but honestly, I am picky when it comes to my feet. They're very structured at the back here, and if your heel swells any, it starts digging into these cork parts. And there's this section here, which I think you can just see on the camera, which is raised and it's cushioned, but it feels like that's digging into the arch of my foot. So not a massive fan of them, to be honest. So what I do have in pretty much all of my Mindel footwear is these ones, which are Mindel Comfort Fit Sports. And the memory foam, it's like a suede, almost like a kid leather on the top, really soft, really smooth. And it's a sort of perforated foam here and memory foam at the front. They breathe surprisingly well, and the thing I find is there's very little friction on here because of how smooth it is. And I find them to be very, very comfortable in the Mindel Comfort Fit boots. They're the best insoles I have, really. But like I said before, if the handwag ones were wider and they'd fit in these vinyls, I'd have them in all day. I really would. So that's your insoles. I mean, there's any amount of other brands, Cedas or Sidas. There's Smart Feet. There's loads. And what you'll find with some of them is, like Smart Feet, they have a plastic structure here that sits into the boot, and it gives you that heel height. I mean, you can see the difference there from the toe to the heel. There's quite a significant difference in height there for your heel drop. The benefit of a heel drop as well is the fact that it pitches you slightly forward, so it feels like you're using less energy to move forward because your boot wants you to go forward. But yeah, so that's footbeds or insoles, and as I say, again, selection's vast. So the last thing to talk about on what you're putting on your feet is actually socks. Alpaca socks, merino wool socks. Now, I'm a big fan of merino wool. I've tried alpaca ones, my feet sweat. Not for me. Merino wool's the only one I can get away with that actually works for me, where I don't get blisters, I don't get hot spots and things like that. These are darn tough merino socks. They're quite expensive, like £28 a pair, but you do get a lifetime guarantee with them, and it's a genuine one. So if I wore these out in 10 years time and send them back to Darn Tough, and I'll get a new pair. I know people who've returned socks and got them back. It doesn't happen that often, but it's a genuine guarantee. On their own, that I would see these as quite an expensive sock, but with that type of guarantee, knowing you'll just keep getting socks for the rest of your life if they wear out, it's not that bad a price, I don't think. These ones are Smart Wool, bit cheaper than the Darn Toughs. I think I pay about 20, 21 something for these. You'll see the difference if I come to the camera. This is quite a tight knit, firm sort of wool construction. This one is much more loose and sort of fluffy. These are my go-to socks, Smart Wools. Love them. They're all right in a pinch, but I'll have them all day long, the Smart Wool socks. That's my personal preference. Some people like things like Bridgedales. Again, with socks, there's any amount there. I know people who wear Danish Endurance, people who wear bamboo ones. But ultimately, it's about what works for you. And it could be that they're quite a thick sock, or that they have arch support, that they're more cushioned in the footbed. Seamless on the toe. There's so many different things to think about. Ultimately, for me, the combination of that sock with that Mindel Comfort Fit footbed in Mindel Comfort Fit boots, I never get a blister, never get a hot spot, never have any problems. That works for me. It took us 5 years to find it, but that's what works for me. What works for you is going to be a very personal thing and very different from person to person. You asked the question, what's the best boot? you could get 100 people all pick out the exact same boot and say, this is the best boot. You might try it and be absolute garbage, because everyone's feet are different and what everyone feels through their feet is different. What else is here about your footwear? Now, there's a few things you can do to try and limit the chance of getting blisters or the chance of getting hot spots and things like that. A hot spot is just when you feel a pinch or a hot area on your foot. That's indicating there's friction there and you may be working towards a blister. What a lot of people do is when they start hiking after a few kilometers, they will take the boots off and re-put them on again, because what that does is it kind of moves things around in your feet. So anywhere that is getting a bit of a hot spot, you're potentially moving it. It's also worthwhile, if you feel like your feet are getting a bit hot and sweaty, stop, have a break, take your boots off, let your feet air, take your socks off, let the air at your feet, let them cool down a bit, and then re-put everything on. Again, things move about a bit, and the cooling effect of the air, and you're drying your feet again. Because with the best will in the world, everybody's feet sweat. Everybody's. So that can also benefit you in the sense that by drying them off and cooling them down, you're removing the chance of that blister forming. Other things people do, some people tape their feet. I did that for quite a long time, actually, until I found my right combination. There's a bunch of videos on YouTube, that show you how to tape your feet. There's a really good one. If I can find it, I'll put a link in the description. I'll also put a link in for Fit for Outdoors, the Welsh girl I was talking about who wears the barefoot boots. That shows you how to tape your feet, and that works very, very well, because what you're doing is you're creating a layer that is essentially an extra thick layer of skin. So any friction is between that and your footwear, rather than your skin in the footwear. And it does work. I've done it loads of times. Other options, I know people who put talcum powder on their feet because it takes away the moisture, and talcum powder is very naturally slippy, so you've removed the friction again. Problem is, if your feet get wet, you've lost that straight away. Another option is Vaseline. I know a lot of people put Vaseline or petroleum jelly, whatever you want to call it. They put that on their feet, and that creates a bit of lubrication so that the feet move around easier. And another little technique people use, I know a few who do this as well, where when they get in the tent on the night time, before they go into their sleeping bag, they'll rub some mentholated petroleum jelly, like Vicks chest rub. They'll rub some of that in their feet, because with the menthol, it has a cooling effect on the feet, so that can help remove any sort of inflammation or soreness in the feet. So the next morning you get up, your feet feel a bit better. And because it has the petroleum jelly, it does the same thing as the Vaseline, so you get like 2 for 1 with that. So that's something else to consider. It could be an option. Now, in your first aid kit, you really want to be carrying some like Compeed, maybe some foot tapes. And the tape that I used to use, I used to get 2 types. One's like a stretchy fabric tape, not like a kinesio tape that the CrossFitters bang everywhere. It's just, if you get the hypoallergenic fabric plasters, sticky plasters, that stuff, put that on, and that adheres to your skin really well. Then on top of that, I would put zinc oxide tape. In the video that I find, I'll put the link on, they do it that way. That's where I learned to tape my feet, and as I say, it does work very well. Now, in terms of the first aid kit, like I say, with the kinesio tape, you can always put your little bit of Vicks or Vaseline or talc or whatever in your first aid kit, and then that covers you for that as well. Just bear in mind, it's much easier to prevent a blister than it is to deal with one when it happens, because there's always a chance of infection, there's the pain factor. And bear in mind, if you're in the middle of the trek, if you're like halfway through, if you can't walk out, your option's the helicopter. That's pretty much it. There's no other way of getting in or out. And if you reach sort of, say, Salka, from that point, you're kind of halfway. So, or just before halfway. So, whichever way you go, you've got the same kind of distance to get out. You've either got to go back to the start or carry out the finish. And if you have really bad blistered feet, or your feet are in bad condition, it's not going to be pleasant whichever way you're going to have to go. There's a guy last year, Greg, who had real trouble with his feet. He and I'm not over egging the pudding here at all when I say that he stripped pretty much the whole skin off the bottom of his feet, because his boots, the first 3 days was really bad weather, so the boots had really bad water ingress, and that rubbing just basically blistered the bottom of his feet so badly. The poor guy had to get like treatment at every station, and he was walking painfully slowly, and you could see it was painful as well. But I take my hat off to the guy, because he managed to get to the end. Like, he still completed it, and I've got a lot of respect for him for that. And I told him that at the end as well, because I admire somebody with that much determination to get to the end, given the condition that his feet were in. And honestly, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. So if you do feel that you're getting a blister, best to stop and deal with it straight away. Get some Compeed on, get some tape on, whatever you do to try and deal with it straight away, because once it gets to a certain point, you're dealing with a full-on blister and all the things that go with it. Now, if you go to the shop to find out what boots you want, if you're totally new to this, I would do it sooner rather than later, because as I've said before, time's ticking on. Your good outdoor stores, they will be able to give you advice on types of boots and things like that. Now, in Sweden, the terrain is very mixed. There's sort of like fairly easy paths through the forest areas at the start and the end. There's rocky sections. There's wooden planks you walk across, So to be honest, your best bet is probably either to go for a bit of an all-rounder, or to go for a heavy-duty boot that is going to cover you for the worst sections, and it'll still be capable in the easier sections, although it will be heavy and whatnot. And that's the way I go. I'm going for the more heavy duty one, just in case I do something stupid like I did last year, and end up with a foot injury. Mine wasn't as bad as Greg's, but it was bad enough. So when you go to the shop, a lot of the shops now, they'll have little walkways and little bridges you can walk over, and rocky sections and things like that, and angles, so you can get a feel of the boot in all directions. Now, a good tip is, when you go to try boots on, if you've already got a backpack, and or even if you haven't actually, in the shop, that more often than not, they'll sell backpacks as well. So grab a backpack, put weight in it, and then try your boots on, and then walk over all the little obstacles and stuff. The reason for that is, you need to know how they're going to feel with your weighted pack on, because, again, same as with the backpacks, you put it on with no weight in, you still don't know what that's going to perform like. Your boots, same script. More weight goes through the sole of your foot when you've got it on your back. And bear in mind, over a course of a long distance hike, that's thousands of impacts. And also, your feet will want to slide forward with the weight as well. And so there's all these things to consider. So honestly, if you can try boots on while wearing a weighted backpack, it's going to more closely simulate what it's going to be like out on the trail. Just putting them on and having a quick mooch around, not the best. Another tip is to try them on at the end of the day. So if you can go to a shop, go there after work or after school or whatever, because naturally through the course of a day your feet will swell a bit. So the size they are in the evening is more closely likely to be what they're going to be at the end of a day. That was an absolute word salad, that one I just said. But yeah, try and simulate the same conditions or the same scenarios. It's not entirely possible, but the more you can do to closely mirror it, the better. What else? Nothing else really. Oh yeah, how you lace your boots is gonna affect things. I've seen it where people have laced so they've gone and then in like boxed it, so rather than cross, like I have mine crossed like this, and some people do it so that they come up and across and up and across, so it's like a box. lacing. If you do that at the bottom, it can give you more room at the bottom because it's not quite as tightly fitted. And then you can cross further up, which means the top's tight but the bottom's loose. And that's the way I like to have mine. I'll have it very loose at the bottom, and then I'll put what we call a surgeon's knot in there, which essentially the surgeon's knot is take your lace and go under, 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 and then pull it tight. And you end up with that. I don't know if you can really see it, that kind of thing, yeah. And that, when you pull that tight, that locks the lace. I've seen it where people will lace them cross all the way up, and then when they go around the top, I don't know what you want to call that, hole, loop, whatever it is, they come back down to the next one, or cross back down to the next one, and then that can pull the top in even tighter. I know people who fasten their bow or fasten the lace on the outside of the boot over here, so then when you're walking, your feet can't catch the loops. There's loads of different ways. If you go into Google and type in boot lacing, there's actually like diagrams that show you a ton of different ways, and they tell you the benefits of lacing them in those certain ways, because that can actually affect how the boot fits you as well, is the way you lace it. I think I've kind of exhausted everything that I can say about this. But yeah, good luck finding the boot you're going to use. But whatever it is, get it sooner rather than later if you don't already have it, because you may find that you need to break them in, and if they're hard to break in like these things are, you might find you've run out of time, and that would be not good. But yeah, every boot has its pros and cons, same as with all kits. All your footbeds have pros and cons, all your socks have pros and cons. It's finding what works for you, and like I say, we're limited on time now, so good luck. And as ever, any questions, stick them in the group, and there'll be people there happy to answer things. The best questions really is, once you've found a boot, asking people, has anyone else used this boot? How does it perform in the rain? What's it like in terms of durability? That kind of stuff. But honestly, what's the best boot? That question's going to get you a million different answers, and none of them are going to be very helpful, to be honest with you, because it doesn't exist. There is no such thing as a best boot. It's the best boot for you. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So thanks again for watching. If you want to subscribe, feel free. My videos ain't that interesting, but it would be nice to get some feedback on the actual Facebook page, because there's a lot of views, and I see from my Facebook analytics, there's a lot of people watching the videos, but there's not much feedback coming back. So I don't know if people are finding these useful, or pure tedium, or they wish I'd just shut up. I honestly don't know, and it would be nice to get some feedback to see if I'm doing these in a useful way, or whether they're just of no value to anyone. So please do let us know. And as I say, if you want to like and subscribe, feel free, no pressure. Until the next one. So the next one is probably going to be on sleep systems, sleeping bags, under mats, air mats, that kind of stuff, pillars, whatever. And then that's essentially the big four done, really: tent, sleeping, boots, rucksack. Everything else is less important, in my opinion, than those four things. So yeah, I think that's what I'll do next. I might do that tomorrow, even when I get in from work. So again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.